Hello everyone. Today I will tell you about the horror stories experienced by netizens from 5 different countries. If you like it, please subscribe to us to bring you more exciting stories. That's the only time I'll do that. And I thought it would be a lovely opportunity today, as it is the day of my birth, to remind you all. There's a lovely link in the description below that says buy me a beer. I mean, what's better than a beer? Anyway, I've taken up enough of your time onto the spooky stories. See you again soon. This happened when I was on a business trip in Los Angeles. I was staying about an hour's drive from the airport in a place called Anaheim, not too far away from Disneyland. It was a pretty nice area, and it seemed safe at night too. There were 24-hour convenience stores and good-looking restaurants right by my hotel. It was great. I had no problem with the location. I had a problem with the hotel I was staying in. The clerk on the front desk was very nice, but the second I checked into my room, literally the second I touched the keycard to the sensor on the door, something didn't sit right with me. I had a real uncomfortable feeling about that room. The hotel room was fine. Nice in fact for a business trip. It was just a normal single bedroom. There was nothing wrong with it. Just I didn't like it. I didn't want to be there. I couldn't put my finger on why though. I didn't let it bother me at the time. I went downstairs to get some dinner in a nearby restaurant. After that, I headed back to my room to go over my notes for the presentation I would be making the next day. I guess that my initial apprehension to the room was brought on by my work nerves. I was immersed in my preparation when I heard a noise. I turned my head in the direction of the sound and I watched as the bathroom door slowly opened by itself. It felt as if someone was opening the door for me to enter, as if I was being beckoned. My spine froze. It scared me. I've never experienced anything like that before. My brain went into problem-solving mode. I guess that my senses were heightened because I was in a new place and I wasn't used to it. For instance, there might be a breeze in the bathroom or a window slightly open. There's always a rational explanation, right? I looked over to the window and then saw that it was open. I smiled and went over and closed it. Problem solved. I went into the bathroom to take a look and of course there was no one in there. Plus the window was shut tight. Satisfied, I went back to preparing for the presentation. After about 15 minutes I heard a rattling sound and then the bathroom door creaked open again. I didn't like it, but I thought that it wasn't that much of an issue. I went over and shut again. When it happened the third time, I gave up on closing the door. If it's open, it can irritate me. Right. Well, where was in the test? That's what I thought at the time. However, the open door started swinging slowly and then it slammed shut. It opened again and then slammed shut. Okay. I can't do this anymore. Time to call the front desk. I thought I asked to switch rooms, but I was refused. Quite impolitely. I was told that the hotel was fully booked. It didn't seem fully booked. I couldn't do much else. I mean, if the front desk says that there aren't any more rooms, then I guess that there aren't any more rooms. Right. I didn't know the area I was in well enough to be running out and searching for other hotels. Plus my company booked this hotel for me. How's it going to look if I just run out on it? With those thoughts in mind, I knew I would have to reluctantly return to my presentation and other less frightening thoughts. I put the phone back on the receiver and started back to the desk. When my legs felt trapped, I had no balance. I nearly flew headfirst into my suitcase. I felt as if someone had a hold of my legs and they had tried to trick me. It was such a frightening feeling. Instinctively, I moved away from the bed. I didn't like the huge gap under the bed. Now I was really anxious and frightened, so I called my friend back home. I told them what was going on. Knowing that they wouldn't laugh at me, my friend gave me some advice. Do you have a Bible in your room? If you do, make friends with it tonight. Keep it by your side. I kind of laughed at this idea, but then I fished around the bedside chest of drawers to see if there was a Bible and luckily there was one. I was flipping through it while chatting to my friend. I flicked through the pages and noticed something strange in slashes as the pages sped by. I saw dark brownish, reddish stains on the pages. I felt sick as I was certain that it was blood. I closed the Bible and saw blood on the edges. You know that white bit around the sides where the pages meet, there were clear blood splatters. I don't know what happened in that room, but I knew that I shouldn't be in there any longer. I didn't care what my boss thought. I just walked the streets until I found another hotel. Something was very wrong, and I'm just thankful that I got away from it. This was a weird experience I had when I was in high school. It happened when my friends and I went to play with our airsoft guns. A survival game is what we call it. There are about 10 of us in all. We used to use this abandoned hotel. It was completely dilapidated and falling apart in places. There was loads of debris in there, making it perfect to pop up and shoot one another. The best thing about it was that it was so far away. There were literally no houses or anything like that nearby. And if we played at night, then there would be no chance of us being disturbed, because some of the kids from our school thought that it was haunted. They didn't even go anywhere near it. Not even the bullies. It was perfect. We really felt like it was just ours. You know, I would sometimes get a bit freaked out in there. I mean, it was a creepy abandoned hotel. On top of that, it was said to be haunted. So who wouldn't be a bit on edge? My friends would make fun of me every time I got freaked out. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I usually got swept up in the excitement of it all and forgot about nagging, eerie feeling the abandoned hotel produced, but not this time. There was something off. That night, after playing intensely for a while, we went up to the 5th floor. There was a big open room, pretty much rid of any debris. We would use the room to chat and make sure all our guns were working, etc. While everyone was gathered, I asked, did any of you feel anything was a bit off in the hotel today? Like sense anything with us? They said that since what we do when we play airsoft is aim our guns at one another, we are bound to have our senses heightened. But some did agree that something felt different that night. Just as we were discussing this, we heard some footsteps on the stairs below. They resounded through the hotel. We hadn't heard any cars or motorbikes approaching it. Like I said before, we were in the sticks. There was nothing but overgrown weeds and bushes surrounding the hotel. Everyone had flashlights. It was a rule. A couple of my pals shone their flashlight through the window down below. We couldn't see any cars or anything. I was relieved as I was worried. The cops had arrived. All that was down there were our bikes. If someone was here, they would have had to walk halfway up a mountain in the dark on roads with little street light. Weird. We still heard those footsteps down below. One of my friends opened the door to our room in the 5th floor and asked, "Are you the police?" "We're just playing here. That's all." When no response from below came, someone else called, "Are you here for ghost hunting or something again?" Nothing but the footsteps of someone below climbing the stairs ever closer to our floor. Some of the others piped up the questions, "What do you want? Do you need some help or something? If we shouldn't be here, we can go." No matter what anyone said, the only reply we got was the sound of someone slowly climbing the stairs. I had already been on edge most of the night. Now I was freaked, fear spreading through our group. In fact, friends murmured, "Whisper, guys. We don't know what's down there. No one run. Just walk calmly," and we left our room and entered the hall. We headed towards the opposite steps, which we had heard the footsteps coming from. Just as we reached the opposite stairs, we heard those same chilling footsteps land on the hallway. We couldn't see anyone. It was terrifying. Then something completely unexplainable happened. It looked for a second as if someone was pointing a light at us. A light not like that of a flashlight. It was there shining in front of us. It was circular in its weight and bobbed. It scared the hell out of us. We bolted. We all just burst past one another in an effort to get out as soon as possible. We heard a terrible noise from above. like something had turned the whole fifth floor upside down. We could still hear the sound of someone pacing around on the stairs and in the lobby up there. I cannot describe to you how terrified I was. We were all shouting and cussing as we ran to our bikes outside. One of my friends was having engine troubles with his bike. It wouldn't start. We were screaming at him to get it going while all our eyes were fixed on the hotel. Finally he got it working and we all sped out of there. We all pulled into a convenience store's parking lot at the bottom of the mountain. We felt safe there. After we calmed down a little, we spoke about what had happened. I can't speak for my friends because I didn't witness this, but more than a couple of them had said that they had seen some faces peering at us from the windows above. While we tried to get our pal's bike started, we stared towards the mountain in the direction of the hotel, and I think we all knew at that point that none of us would ever go back there again. I've been living alone in Tokyo for the past 2 years. My apartment building is a pretty central location and alongside the railway racks. My apartment isn't the biggest, though it's good enough for me. As soon as you walk in through the front door, you pretty much step into the kitchen. There are 2 other rooms towards the back of the apartment. It's just a very ordinary apartment. It's a comfortable enough place to live in. Nice sized bedroom and living room. One issue is sometimes the electricity goes out, especially the lights. I always thought this was down to passing trains living so close to the tracks and all. So what usually happens is I hear the sound of an approaching train and brace myself for a possible blackout. After a few seconds all the lights would come back on. The breaker never gets stripped. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. It was just an odd quirk of the apartment. I didn't like it at first, but I soon grew to live with it. I didn't understand why it did that, but I guess it was just down to faulty wiring or something I didn't mind. It usually happened around the time I would take a bath. One night I came home after working really late. Usually I would prepare my evening meal before taking the bath. I checked the time and it was 7 minutes past midnight. Shortly after I heard the familiar sound of the train approaching and then the lights went out. The lights going out in the bathroom had sort of become part of my nightly routine, and because I was in the kitchen, not the bathroom, when the lights went out it really spooked me. I looked up and my eyes were drawn to the living room. The whole apartment was in total darkness. I noticed that something was off and then I saw it. There was a shadowy figure stood in the middle of my living room. It was definitely a human. I could tell by the outline. It was unbelievably frightening to see this shadow person in my living room. It knew I had seen it. It turned to face me and started moving across the room towards me. I was frozen in horror as it drew closer. It raised its right arm, and just as it came within an arm's length of me, the lights came back on. With the apartment now lit again, I could see everything: the laminate floors, the walls, living room. They were all the same. There was no shadow in my apartment anymore. I looked around for a reasonable explanation for what I had just seen, but I couldn't find anything. At one point I thought it might have been a trick of the lights outside, but that was a very tenuous conclusion. The black shadow or shadow person is still in my room. It seems as if it only appears in the living room. If you are in the bathroom or hall, you won't see it. I should really move apartments or get some help to cleanse mine. I don't know where to start with all that. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. It happens always at the same time. 7 minutes past midnight. I have to make sure I'm in a different room. It's good that I know how to live for the time being, but there have been some close calls. I'm worried about coming home drunk one night and falling asleep on the sofa. That thought really frightens me. This was an experience which convinced me of the paranormal's existence. There is still a lingering sense of doubt which persuades me to believe that I was just overtired. I don't know. I wonder what you will think either way. It was terrifying. It was the last working day of the year. That year being 2013. There was a big push to tie up all the loose ends before the end of the year, and since I was a team leader, I felt the obligation to work later than I usually would. I had already missed the last train home, so I thought I'd stay at work. I should just say that I work on the 6th floor of an 8th-floor building. Besides kitchenettes, toilets and smoking areas, the floor plan to my floor was pretty open. It was home to the desks of around 2 employees, so you can imagine how open the floor is. When everyone leaves their own desks, they turn off the lights. This happened when I was in the 1st or 2nd year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I was pretty much in the dark in there alone. I didn't mind. I had my music on and I was completely immersed in my work before I knew it. It was 2 a.m. It was around this time that I needed to go to the bathroom. I went in and the bathroom light was already on. I know what you're thinking. There's nothing strange about that, right? Well, I'm not sure if other companies do this, but mine does. In the daytime, we are always told to turn the lights off and that to save electricity. I had been on my own for most of the night, so the light being on felt on. I wondered if someone had just forgotten to turn it off. I've done that plenty of times myself. I went in but I felt something was off. I quickly realized the source of my unease. In the bathroom there are 2 stalls and both of their doors were shut. I was wondering if the janitor shut the doors because it was the end of the year or something. But then why wouldn't he turn the light off? There was something off about the bathroom that night. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, yet my own curiosity wouldn't let me leave. I moved closer to the stone doors. I knew I wasn't alone in there. I can't explain that feeling, but I was definitely not alone. My legs felt as if they were stuck to the floor. I couldn't move. But I heard something. There was this dreadful scratching sound coming from one of the stalls. It was coming from the right-hand side. Then it stopped. Then the scratches restarted from the left-hand stall. Then, when the scratching sound stopped on the left, it began again on the right. I stood there in silence trying to understand what was going on. The scratching got louder and there was a kind of trickling sound of water coming from the stall which accompanied it. I couldn't stand being in there anymore. I wanted out. Something in that bathroom wanted me out there too. I could sense it. This evil scratching sound was sending shivers up my spine. I burst out of the bathroom and ran down the stairs. I didn't want to wait for the elevator. When I reached the 1st floor, I almost ran right into the security guard. He asked what was wrong and what all this screaming was about. I didn't even realize that I was that terrified. Running down the stairs is a total blur to me in my memory. There's something in the bathroom on the 6th floor, I squeaked out. I used the bathroom on the 1st floor and asked the guard to stand nearby. I'm pretty embarrassed about that. He then took me to the security guard's office. I calmed down and explained things as best I could. The security guard was kind. He listened to what I had to say without prejudice. I asked him if anyone else had an experience similar to mine on the 6th floor and he just shook his head. In response, he said that he was going to go check it out and I went with him up to the 6th floor. I couldn't go back to work in fear. I wanted a logical answer. We could have the elevator on the 6th floor and approach the bathroom. The lights were off in there. When the guard turned them on, we saw that both the toilet stalls were wide open. I felt nothing. There was nothing in there anymore. I didn't turn the light off, but those doors were not open. I had seen enough. I got my bag and got the hell out of there. There were no trains until the morning, so I killed some time in a nearby convenience store. That was the end of my experience in the new year. I told some of my colleagues about the incident, fully expecting them to laugh and say, "Yeah, sorry, I set that up." But none of them said anything. It wasn't a prank. I still work for the same company. I just refused to work late at the office. This is a true story. It happened roughly 2 years ago. I was at home that day with my grandparents. It was morning and I was sleeping soundly, when I felt a few swift taps on my head as if someone was poking me. It jolted me awake. I slowly opened my eyes and looked around the room, but there was no one there. I didn't understand this, as my grandparents were old. It's not like they would do this and run off for a prank. The more I thought about it, the less I could sleep. It was very unnerving. I didn't feel comfortable in my room, so I went downstairs to the living room. I tried to convince myself that it was just a dream or it was my imagination. I knew deep down I was lying to myself, though I was still half asleep. As I went into the living room, I said good morning to my grandparents and went to use the bathroom. In our house, the bathroom is directly beneath the stairs. This meant that if anyone used the stairs when you were in the bathroom, you would hear them thudding their way up or down the stairs. The moment I went into the bathroom that morning, I heard someone running up the stairs, and I mean running. I knew that it couldn't possibly be my grandparents doing that. I ran out of the toilet, really freaked out. I asked my grandparents what was happening and who just ran upstairs. They looked at me puzzled, so I ran upstairs and checked all the rooms, but there was no one there who was in my house. I got a feeling that this is just the beginning of something possibly paranormal. This happened when I was in Okinawa. I was in elementary school. At the time, I was suffering from a terrible lack of sleep. This was because the house that I lived in was incredibly active. Strange and mysterious things were happening often back then. I was used to waking up in the middle of the night, like 1 or 2 a.m. The night in question was not unlike any other. I woke up at around 2 and tried my best to get back to sleep, and just as I felt I was drifting off, I heard something. It was a kind of tapping sound. It came from the direction of the kitchen. It sounded as if someone was messing around with the tableware. Something was distantly rumbling in there, and it wasn't the first time that I heard this. There should be no one in our kitchen at that. It wasn't as if anyone in the family was an ital. The sound continued. I had heard things like this before, but now they seemed to be escalating. I heard a low male voice mutter something, and from then on I would wake up and hear the same things again and again. My parents would never believe me. One night I woke up as usual in the middle of the night and desperately tried to get back to sleep before I heard any of those terrifying sounds. But I just couldn't. I heard the shaking of objects in the kitchen, drawers opening and things toppling over in there. Then, as usual, I heard the distant sound of a male voice muttering. Only this time it was slightly more audible. I was hiding beneath the covers as I realized it was getting closer to my bedroom. The voice got closer and clearer, and I was able to make out some words. "Come with me. Come with me." The voice repeated. It sounded like there was someone right beside my bedroom window. I was utterly terrified. I just hid beneath the covers and screwed up my eyes as tightly shut as I could. I did not want to see the owner of that horrible voice. I don't know how, but suddenly I had the courage to jump out of bed and run to my parents' room. I banged on their door and tried to open it, but they had locked it from the inside. I just remember crying and screaming until they had a response. They finally opened the door, and we still talk about that night. They said that I had a completely pale face. I told them that I heard someone calling me to come with them outside, and then they let me sleep in their bed. Just as I was drifting off to sleep again, I heard the sound of banging at my parents' door. Naturally, I was terrified, but I was quickly relieved to see that it was just my younger brother who had woken up to see I wasn't in the room and came to find me. I was able to get sleep now, but not for long. I was awoken by the sound of banging yet again at the door. There were no other members of my family out there. We were all in my parents' room. This meant that there was something else out there, and I didn't like thinking about that. The volume of the banging rose louder and louder. It wasn't knocking. It was more like it was trying to break the door down. I was scared, and I looked towards my mother to see if she was awake. She was. I looked her in the eyes, and she just put a finger to her mouth and said shh. I knew that they were aware of the phenomenon. At that point they had just never said anything. They weren't doing anything about it either. I kind of hated them in that moment. Then one morning I came downstairs to see my dad looking pale. He looked troubled. He told me about it many years later. He said he'd been suffering with sleep paralysis. He said he awoke to the sound of religious chanting. He looked around and saw someone in robes sit near him reciting scripture. He said it was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to him. He heard familiar voices crying in the background. It was his family and friends. He said it felt like he was attending his own funeral. He tried to scream, and that was when he eventually was able to wake up and move his body. My father was living in fear since that day. It wasn't too long after when a priest visited our home to purify it. Soon after, for other reasons, we moved in our new home. My sleeping pattern improved dramatically. We were friends with the person who rented the house after us. He was one of my dad's work colleagues, and he said he had seen something disturbing in that house. He said he saw a wartime soldier stood outside the window of mine and my brother's old room. I don't know if there is still any paranormal activity happening in that house, but I don't ever want to go back there.